Do we live in the era of the feudal internet? This term has been tossed around the past few years, but what does our modern technological world have in common with medieval lords? The term feudal internet means an internet where your average user is a serf to a much larger entity. This was not always the case for computers. For most of the history of home computers, the user was responsible for almost everything that occurred on their device. Need a software patch? You need to go online and download it. Need a new word processor? You need to go to the store, buy a disk, and get a software key. Need to configure your router? You better get the manual and hope you know what you're doing. But in our current era, much of these tasks are handled over the internet or in the cloud, with large tech companies essentially acting as custodians of your data and hardware. It's basically the difference between hosting your website at your home versus using a service like Amazon Web Services. In some ways, this is great. The internet can be a complicated and scary place. Lots of people lack the technical know-how and resources to do things like host an internet server from home. For lots of people, it makes sense that their photos are backed up by Google Photos, and that their contacts are backed up on iCloud, or that their games are owned in a virtual store. But these systems can also have their drawbacks. As internet services become more and more centralized in the hands of larger and larger entities, the internet is increasingly beholden to forces in corporations and big governments around the world. Over time, the internet is becoming just another version of TV or radio, a mass corporatized monopolistic industry. And usually when an industry becomes centralized in this way, it also leads to a lack of innovation and eventually to stagnation. Bruce Schneier, a well-known computer security expert, has argued that the way our internet is structured today is akin to that of a feudal society. Much like medieval systems of feudalism, most of the citizens of the digital age do not own their own property on the internet. Instead, they are given permission to use the property and resources of a much larger entity. Most users of the web today could be thought of as serfs in a much larger system. The majority of one's time on the web is likely spent on one of these services and sites created by these massive tech conglomerates. When you upload content to a site like YouTube or Facebook, you lose a lot of agency and control of your data. In many cases, the social network you use owns the rights to the media you upload. Now your data becomes bundled with millions of other people to be hoarded and analyzed and eventually sold or stolen. These large internet companies can make your life more convenient, but at the cost of choice, security, and autonomy. The Facebooks and Googles of the world don't even see most people they serve as customers. Most people are users, and the real customers are the businesses paying for ad revenue. All of your information and content is in some server somewhere with everyone else's, and there's no guarantee of security. You have to put your trust in the hands of the security at that company. You have little to no recourse if your information gets leaked or your privacy is violated. And security breaches of user information are happening more and more frequently. Facebook has been accused of mishandling user information many times. In some cases, even using their users' information for psychological studies and political research for foreign companies. Twitter and LinkedIn have had quite a few security breaches over the years. The information lords can basically treat your information with extreme carelessness, and you would not be aware of it until it's too late. In this feudal security setup, you have little say or guarantees over how your data is treated. So what alternative could exist to this current setup? Some experts have suggested that one way forward is to have laws governing what companies can do with your data and create a standard for how user data is treated. In this model, users would have a sort of digital bill of rights that could guarantee things like access to services, high levels of security, and ownership rights of their contents. Another way to stop the rise of the feudal web is to use more decentralized and distributed web technologies. Things like cryptocurrencies and IPFS and other Web3 technologies are good examples of this. There are decentralized alternatives to Facebook, like Minds, and decentralized alternatives to YouTube, like Library. As these technologies increase in adoption and have improved performance, they may act as a counterbalance to the more centralized Silicon Valley system. Whatever the future holds, it is clear that the data of users is extremely valuable, and that the battle for control over that data is far from over. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to find more content like this, be sure to subscribe, and please check the description for more links that help support me to make content like this.